Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea. You're well tuned in to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. And we certainly have some perspective this morning. Some of you, both of you listeners out there will remember we always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. And it seems appropriate to the old fella here. I want to toss a big kudo, in the direction of District 27 Supervisor Kent Frobe and his Board of Education. They have seen fit to redo and rework what we know as Ralph Gale Field, which is a baseball diamond right across from the junior high building. Ralph Gale was a venerable old gentleman here. Well, yeah, he's my age, so he's somewhat old. No, seriously,
just say almost old.
I had great respect, and everybody in the community had great respect for Ralph Gale. So somebody on that school board years back thought fit to name that athletic facility across from the junior high, the old high school building, Ralph Gale Field. And so they're reworking that and spending some money. Kent, I don't know who wrote that grant, but apparently most of the money is coming from a grant. And so whoever wrote that grant did a heck of a job. Also, a kudo and tip of the hat, a snappy salute to Woody and Sue Jones. They've underwritten the cost of the new scoreboard. So thank you, Sue and Woody, for that. Let's get down to serious business.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you a question.
Well, this was serious, by the way. I don't want to degrade that. Go right ahead.
Wasn't Ralph Gale, didn't he play a semi-pro ball?
Oh, honey, I don't remember. That's even before my time. He was a farmer here, a retired farmer.
I was thinking,
nice gentleman.
If somebody knows the answer to that. Jim, do you know the answer to that? Or did I make it up?
648-5510. Somebody might have the answer to Mrs. Busby's question. Did Mr. Ralph Gale ever play baseball? Well, I'm certainly played satellite baseball, but professional ball. I don't know the answer to that, Judith. But we've got two guys who drove all the way from Lincoln.
All the way from downtown.
So we want to make. Oh well, no, one of them drove from Atlanta. So we want to make his trip worthwhile. So get right down. Get down seriously.
Well, these two guys have been the boss of a very big project, and it's been ongoing now for how long, fellas?
Well, it seems like forever.
Yeah.
Well, a project that large takes forever.
Yeah. It is true. It is true, and there's so many things that go on behind the scenes.
Every day there's something else that popped up that you thought you had provided for.
Sure.
Sure enough, you didn't.
Sure. It is a interesting combination of complicated technical and physical challenges that have to be overcome, and those things take time to do it correctly, safely.
And if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right?
Yes, indeed. There's a lot of people that provide commentary for us so that we know whether we're doing it right or wrong.
Just
that's always
just.
Nice. Yes.
Just or unjust.
But it is, and Dave and I were just talking about this the other day. It is amazing how when you're patient, you see things come together. This is fragmented, but it's been handled for about 6 months. This aspect of the project has been going on for 8 months, but it's being developed, it's being nurtured, cultured, and then amazingly those pieces come together, and that's when now we're beginning to see a lot of those independent efforts migrate over to the central location and become a project that will eventually get started here pretty soon.
Well, Mr. Walter, somebody might drive around the courthouse, even today, and look up and see all that iron metal up there, and they go, what's that for? Maybe we ought to start from square one.
Sure.
And explain why all that scaffolding is going up there. And boy, that's a lot of weight on that building.
It is a lot of weight, and we're blessed in a way that the building was made and constructed when it was, because the people that put it together felt that it had to last. They didn't know any different. Today, buildings are being built with planned obsolescence.
Really?
Not because they can't do it physically, they can't put the materials together, but from a market standpoint, it's no longer going to be desirable.
Yeah.
Structures like that maintain the character and the personality, in addition to the incredible constructed building itself. because of that fact. It exists and continues. It's got a certain character, charm, romance that people just strive to get. We don't see that in today's construction.
There aren't very many towns in Illinois, I'm sure, who are blessed with the square that we're blessed with.
Well, I
You are
give a
right.
point, just down the south 30 miles, less than 30, town of Springfield, they created an underground parking spot in the middle of the downtown, right underneath the old state capitol building. And in order to do that, Judith, they took that building apart piece by piece and marked the pieces, stored them on the Illinois State Fairgrounds, went ahead with their construction, and put the underground parking in, and then brought those pieces back like a crossword puzzle, and put them back together piece by piece, number by number, thereby saving
Sure.
a magnificent structure down there. The city square would be bereft if that wasn't there.
Yeah, yeah.
It'd just be a piece.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Kudos. You're giving out kudos. Kudos to them.
And our good folks in the city council, or I beg your pardon, the county government, decided to save that building as opposed to raising it and having an eyesore down there or a park that meant nothing. As it is now, due to David Blankenship's county board, we've saved something that'll be down for the ages. But it's not been without its troubles, and let's address the big issue down there, Mr.
Blankenship,
No,
Walters.
Mr. Walter. No, single with a singular, not plural.
This is
Mr. Walter,
Wednesday, so it's singular.
You decided, in your infinite wisdom, or somebody's infinite wisdom, to cover that dome and with a, for want of a better word, a tent. And
Correct.
that's why that scaffolding is sitting there now.
That's one of the reasons.
One of the reasons,
Sure,
okay?
sure.
And in this tent, now you even have what I call a little cupola on top of that wonderful dome.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that will be covered as well.
This is interesting that you word it that particular way. Number one, we're putting the steel scaffolding up first and foremost so that the craftsmen who are going to be doing the repairs on the dome have access to almost literally every square inch of the dome. It's going to take a while, so we needed that access to be permanent so they could reside in a particular spot on the dome and do their work. If it was temporary, if they were only going to be in a spot for 10 minutes, we could have devised many other ways
Yeah.
of getting them to
It
that
may
spot.
take 2 or 3 weeks to get to a square yard.
Correct.
This wasn't your first rodeo, was it?
Third or fourth maybe, but not the first.
Yeah.
Correct. So we have the access. That's the primary reason. Secondarily, we are going to throw that tent up, as you say, so that when we start taking the dome apart, it can rain until the cows come home, and we will have it protected so that no water can get inside of the courthouse. That's the second and almost equal reason why the scaffolding
Technically,
is
that
up.
ought to be a very difficult thing. We have some gully washers come around here once in a great while.
It
And
is-
so technically, keeping that water out, that's got to be a
Yes.
big deal.
Yeah, that's a challenge. And second, real close to that rain is the wind.
Oh, yeah.
It
And
is
we have
incredibly
that.
windy here. And so to devise and create a scaffolding with the enclosure, which now will become a kite from its resistance to the wind, we had to build that structure formidable enough to withstand the wind hitting that encapsulated steel scaffolding. That puts an incredible amount of stress that ordinarily would not be there. So we had to compensate for that. That's why you see the tremendous structure as it is being built for the steel
And that's one of the
scaffolding.
reasons I'm asking this as a question, not making a statement, Mr. Walter. That's one of the reasons that we see that heavier metal work that's
That is
resting
exactly
on. That's our
correct.
base for it all.
That is correct. That is correct. It takes the point loads, plural, and displaces them to areas of the building that can adequately support it. and raises the capability of the whole system against the winds.
Well, a tip of your beer, whatever your favorite drink is, wine or a cup of coffee, to the old boys who designed that, and the old boys who popped for the big money to pay for it at that time.
Absolutely.
And
without that, it would not be possible.
Yes, because they laid the right foundation, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have this is a stupid question because things come up, but what is your best estimate of when you might start taking that steel down?
Taking the steel down will probably be the first quarter of next year. January, February, in that vicinity.
And we have to factor in that there are going to be a lot of days which you can't send people up there because of the weather.
Right. Yes. Now, having said that, the encapsulation will obviously allow a certain portion of those days ordinarily that would have kept us off. It will allow construction to continue. When you get into the lightning, that's probably our first and foremost concern. That is metal up there. It is highly conductive.
Yeah.
And we don't want to put them in harm's way, and that would be an immediate source of harm. The second would be the wind. That if it's formidable enough, we don't want them up there. Thirdly, if it's just a heavy rain unaccompanied by wind, that's not a problem. We will have the umbrella up, so to speak, that will take care of it, and we can continue working. So we might be able to do 50% at least of those days that ordinarily we would not be able to work. We should be able to continue.
Will you use salamanders or something like that for some heat up there so that they can work halfway comfortably?
Well, remember, this is a political structure, so if we just open up some areas
well,
down
you're
below,
right about that. There's plenty of heat to
Wow.
up. Yeah.
plenty of heat. There will be periods of time where you have extremes, and even though it's encapsulated and protected against the wind, it's still going to be cold. And we have the materials to be concerned about in terms of how they function when it's that cold. And of course, we have the comfort of the men. You can bundle a guy up, and Dave and I both know this from being in the field doing work. You can bundle up and stay warm, but your production rate goes down to 5%, maybe if you're lucky. You work 5 minutes, you go inside to get warm for the 55 minutes.
Well, for those two listeners stayed at the Glendale Tap too long and don't know what we're talking about, we're talking about, of course, our beloved courthouse, which has graced our city's presence for these many years. And lo and behold, things that old, they start to wear out.
Sure.
And we get leaks and so forth, and we had some very serious problems. And Mr. Blankenship and his county board had to wrestle with that problem and make determination of what's the best way to go. And some of the smart alecks down around, I'll just tear the damn thing down. Well, you have to rethink that situation seriously. And so our board did rethink that situation, and as a result, we're going to keep our courthouse. And I think the other thing to thank that we passed that referendum. So thanks to the voters who saw fit to make sure that we can do what they're doing down there right now. It's taken a long time to get to where we are now, and as you drive by, you kind of figure, well, when are they going to get that done?
Yeah,
so we're talking about the first quarter of next year, if all goes well.
Where the steel
I put that caveat in there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Judy.
When you were assigned, David Blankenship, to this committee on the county board, did you have any idea that it wasn't going to be like being sure that all the traffic lights were working or something?
Yeah, I did. I realized the minute that they appointed me that here we go. It's going to be quite a ride, and I knew with the undertaking of the restoration, I could only imagine what impact it'd have on my life, and it's been that and then some, actually.
Well, Mr. Walters, you can't just walk into Old Joe's and put out the word, I'm hiring 12 people. These people that you have up there are people with skills. Whence cometh they? You have to have a pretty good pool of people who know what they're doing to get up there and do this work.
Well, we often say that we present them with a questionnaire and a quiz and a test before they hire on, and if they pass, we don't hire them.
There was that to be said.
You have to be, half nuts to do what they do. But in reality, they, along with all the other craftsmen and professionals that are involved with this project, they combine their skills with a certain respect for the building, and it's a challenge for them. Every single building, no matter how similar the scaffolding looks, is totally different. So they take great pride in their ability to continue erecting in a safe manner a system that is going to provide the workers safe access to the dome to make repairs. They're young in terms of age. They are very old in terms of experience. It's almost like when they were able to walk, this is what they gravitated to. We have obviously engineers that have put the whole design together to make sure that fundamentally it is accurate from what is needed and what we want to do, and they take great pride in putting it together. Absolutely.
And I'm sure that no matter how much planning and care you put into that, you're going to have a surprise once in a while.
You would almost start losing sleep when there are no surprises. That's inherent with the restoration industry. You don't know. You're not building a building brand new where you need 100 concrete blocks and 40 2x4s and 16 bags of mortar. This is totally undefined, and surprises, that's part of the charm of doing this work. You see things that maybe haven't been seen by human eyes for 100 years in the building itself. Or you recognize the ways that the building was put together 150 years ago. I think it was 1906 in that ballpark where the building was built, and you almost are able to put yourself back in that time period when you see things and how they are constructed, and you realize that those men, not unlike ourselves, had to do a lot of thinking at the spur of the moment and continue because of lack of experience. They also run into surprises and have to overcome those and continue with the construction. So we can almost juxtapose and put ourselves, and I think Dave and I have talked about this several times, where can you imagine being back there, 120 years ago, and thinking the things that they thought and doing the things that they did?
Or seeing it built given the tools of the time.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, yes.
The tools
we
of the
think
time.
we're so brilliant.
Those columns, for instance, that are on the sides of a courthouse, just erecting them with the tools of that time is amazing. 648-5510. Our guests this morning, Mr. David Blankenship, Mr. Bill Walter. These gentlemen are intensely and vitally involved in the renovation of our courthouse. As I've alluded to a few minutes ago, and will continue to do so, Mr. Blankenship and the County Board of Supervisors made the right decision, and you taxpayers, that's going to include them, making the right decision to underwrite this referendum that you passed, because in so doing, you've preserved a memory of time for us in Logan County. I hate to see what you would put up there, a steel shed of some sort for them to operate. What, Mr. Blank, Mr. Walter, you're preserving heritage. Have you built new buildings from scratch in your expertise?
From a commercial and industrial standpoint, no.
So this is in essence, it's not a new ball game, because obviously you brought a great deal of expertise, and your firm offers a great deal of support in that. But how often would you tackle a courthouse like this?
You'd be surprised.
Well, really?
I'll back up by saying that I was indoctrinated to the philosophy of restoration and preservation by my family. My grandfather came over from Germany, and he began repairing existing buildings.
Really?
My dad came in and did the same thing. So at every meal, at every opportunity, there was a conversation. That's all I heard. So I thought it was just natural to step in and do that.
That's what we do when
we
we grow up, huh?
That's
So
exactly
you just
right.
morphed into this.
That's exactly right. So it was infused, whether I knew it or not, the love of existing buildings, especially the ones like courthouses and Capitol buildings churches, old academic buildings on college campuses, the ones that almost talk to you when you walk by.
Yeah.
That provides a lot of charm. We do, and we have been very fortunate in having done a lot of courthouses. And I have to be very honest when I say that it is amazing how this particular courthouse ranks at the very top as far as its personal charm and characteristics. A lot of courthouses are just buildings. This is a building with an immense amount of design character, and the structure itself was so well made. It's very rewarding to work on it.
It sounds like you built up quite a respect for the people who put this up.
Totally. You know, having again grown up in the family, my grandfather was a stone carver, so they created almost what I'm working on. You know, from a trade standpoint.
I bet they'd like to come to work with you one day and see this courthouse, huh?
Wouldn't that be a treat?
Wouldn't that be
Be a
nice?
treat?
Anybody come to you, David, shaking her head and say, how do we get into this?
Maybe a few. That doesn't really happen too often. We get a lot of input.
Well, I bet you get a lot of
Yeah, way to put it.
comes from Joe's place on the corner.
Yeah, we have a lot of commentary. Many of which could probably start their own morning show, I'm sure.
Is there much, and I mean this seriously, not facetiously, is there a lot of criticism or much criticism for what you're doing, David?
I would say that there is. A lot of it would be what I would consider to be non-constructive, but we do definitely pay close attention to the constructive criticisms, and frankly, we grow every day.
Yeah.
We are looking at this thing day in and day out. We're roughly 2/3 complete with all plans, and incorporated in that is many of which are already 95% complete. So there's a lot of drawings, a lot of engineering plans, a lot of conceptuals, and so good criticism, and there's a lot of that.
Yes,
we
yeah.
listen to and take it to heart. But there is some non-constructive criticisms that go on. But my response to that is, where were they when the neglect of 20 years and 30 years have been taking place? Where was that criticism then? You know.
I'm sure you've run into some surprises, though.
Daily, honestly.
I bet.
We do, really.
Give us an example of what can happen. You know, you get your plans all laid out, everything is going along smoothly, and then pretty soon, oops.
Well, you alluded to it earlier, Judy, and that would be the scaffolding, for example.
I have a
We had to
surprise
put
for you, though.
a stop on the scaffolding so we could brace it up heavier with the frame.
I surprised Mrs. Busby that we're almost into the halfway mark of the program, and we haven't had a commercial yet, so we might lose our jobs. Welcome back to the studio, WLCN 96.3 on your FM dial. A program, of course, each Wednesday morning is Viewpoint. A guest this morning, Mr. Bill Walter and Mr. David Blankenship. Gentlemen, just for those of you who haven't been paying strict attention, David Blankenship is a member of our county board and was part of the steering committee that hired Mr. Walter's firm. And that's been a godsend for us here in Logan County to have men in the county board who were interested in the future and not just doing what's most expeditious for the moment. It appears to be that we hired the right firm in having Mr. Walter firm come here and do this. If you haven't driven around the courthouse, take a look. There's a lot of work going on up there every day. It may not look like there's much progress. Mrs. Busby, you go right ahead with your question, my dear.
We were talking off
She owns
the air.
51% of the show, boys. I have to give her some time.
We were talking off the air about COVID, and it's obvious that there isn't a person that it hasn't affected in one way or another. Well, you've been hit pretty hard by it, haven't you?
It continues to be an amazing fact as we progress with this project, that along with the obvious inconvenience and concern that we have for the well-being of the individuals, it has a tangential effect in almost everything that is going on with this business. The obvious spike in the material costs
Yes.
have made us fall back immediately and do some recalculations on how much will it cost. We put forth a projected budget cost for the project, and ordinarily that changes daily anyway. But when you add this whole concept of the pandemic and the things that has hit dramatically, the manufacturing of specific items for the project has been, from a time standpoint, delayed into the month category. Number of months all of a sudden, and some of the electrical components that Dave and I talk about, he is obviously most familiar with that. But when you talk about a 12 to 18 month lead time for a light switch, I'm exaggerating for effect, but that's almost the kind of categorically imposing delays that we're looking at. The material costs, the 2x4, going from a cost of $8.97 per 12-foot board, now all of a sudden it's $29. So it makes you rethink what it is that you're doing and how that you need to do it to accommodate this. We can't simply just go back and say we need more money.
Yeah.
That's a way for a lot of people to do things, but we don't.
Not the way this works.
We can't do that.
Yeah.
We want to pay attention to the health and the inconveniences that it's having towards the personal individual and their families. But in addition to that, we have to be very conscious of how it affects the business portion. The truck drivers that are getting our materials from point A to point B, all of a sudden are compromised. So when somebody says, I'll get that there in 2 days, maybe that's what they would have said 2 years ago. Now it's, you'll see me when you see me.
And they have to accept it as that.
Yeah. And there's no getting mad at anybody. It is a reality that we are faced with nowadays, and that has, and Dave and I don't know how many times we've sat down and redone the schedule for this project, little bits and pieces of it, not the entire thing necessarily, but we look at it and say, okay, what we thought was going to take a week, now we have to maybe say 3 weeks, and so you extrapolate that into every portion of the project, and you realize this is going to be a very interesting, and we're not unique. Everybody has this situation in the whole world, I guess. But our particular interest is this project, so we have to be very careful making sure that we just don't extend this into oblivion. We do have a projected deadline. We still want to meet that deadline, and we just have to play with the cards that are dealt to us.
Well, that's the problem. You have to play the hand you're dealt.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you had mentioned earlier about the surprises that both of us have run into. It makes a huge difference when you're rowing a boat in high waves and high winds, whether you're by yourself or you get to have a partner like Dave in the boat with you. All of a sudden everything is possible. And what ordinarily might have been a very negative aspect of whatever you're running into can be turned into a positive. And the team that has been put together, the county people, the people that are in the community, all of a sudden there are no problems. It is just a situation that needs to be dealt with, and everybody cooperates towards the goal of getting that done.
I bet you say thank God for that right along, don't you?
Every day.
You know, I'd like to make a comment, Judith, if I may, and to the listeners. If you sit here in the studio with David and Bill, you suddenly begin to get pretty anxious about this. By that I mean you're happy to see how well they're doing, but you don't want any roadblocks thrown up. Now, I expect to be here for the grand opening, so there's an extra bonus for you. And I'll be there with it when it says, don't blame me, I voted for Blankenship. Do you have, serious?
Well, for us, you see, to say that, neither one of us are 29 anymore. I don't know whether you'd notice that.
So,
we all know the boat in the same regards, yes. Yeah.
Well, we came over in the same boat. The grand finale, would it be safe to say, gentlemen, that we would be saying something in spring of next year?
As far as the entire project, no.
Is that a little too...
I love your optimism. I'm afraid I would disappoint.
Is that right?
Come next spring.
Geez, I may not be here for that.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. We measured your orneriness.
But this
we're
project,
probably still 16 to 18 months.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the times we spoke to you, it was 22, 24 months, and we've obviously been able to whittle some of that time down, but we're still probably in the 2023.
That's there's some people, somebody I know really well, they're hobbling around looking at that place, hoping they'll get it done. That may not happen for some of us. In all reality, and I'm not being facetious about this at all, you never know. The ship might be sailing on smooth seas, and the next thing you know, the winds come up and you got some high seas.
Sure. You will, as well as everybody, will see factions of the project as they are completed. The dome will be completed long before things that you won't see inside being completed. So you'll be able to be privileged to that. That'll be done by next spring.
Well, that's not a given either. David, seriously, we talked about the dome. That's the exterior. Now, incorporated in this broad project is heating and air conditioning and so forth.
That's correct.
That's a part of it that we will never see. But that's going to inure to the benefit of all those who use the courthouse, particularly the great staff. We have, I've said this often, and I still mean it, we have a great bunch of people working underneath that dome. Yeah. We have some really fine office holders and their associates. So I guess I'm saying in a long-winded way, you're going to change the entire atmosphere as far as the air is concerned, the handling of air in that building. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. And there'll be a lot of individual controls in certain areas. Right now, the entire structure is on a singular thermostat. So there's going to be multiple zones, multiple different systems. And we actually are building into the design characteristics some redundancy. So right now, for example, if a boiler goes down, we actually have two boilers. Only one is up and running, and we had to nearly sacrifice it when we began this project. So if a boiler goes down, for example, we have to send people home, and it's quite costly, and it's it's very difficult when we can't provide that public service. So we've built into this some redundancy as well, which is good because of COVID and the availability of parts. If we had a system go down, we could be waiting sometimes months for the part to come in, especially this day and age. So we've got an entirely different system where it's going to have a lot more controls, and it'll be much more, I think, pleasant environment for our public officials and their employees to work in, and they can control their individual areas and the temperatures much better, and we'll eliminate a lot of this. It's hotter at the top and colder at the bottom, a lot of the balance issues that we've experienced for years. We should be able to eliminate a lot of those issues, and again, the redundancy, which is going to be important, because if something goes down, we will be able to keep the facility open.
There are so many technologies today that would be available to you that they couldn't have dreamt about when they built that.
That's true. We actually have looked at 5 different systems for this facility.
Is that right?
Yeah, we have, in the planning stages, we've reviewed 5 different systems.
So far, we've talked about the exterior, but moving underneath that dome, for instance, our third floor courtroom, I vouchsafe to say, and I don't know anything about this at all, but I vouchsafe to say that there are very few counties which enjoy a courtroom of that, for want of a better word, grandeur.
Yes.
That's a very unique courtroom. And I bet you that at all the new buildings that go up from Cairo to Rockford, you won't find a courthouse with that kind of a charm.
Were you kind of impressed when you came? You were from out of town.
I was flabbergasted.
Seriously,
they have. I'm not going to call it a competition, but one county compared to another.
Sure.
They puff their chests up. They say our courthouse is this, our courtroom is this. By all standards across the state of Illinois, Lincoln possesses the number 1 and or number 2 courthouse in the entire state.
Well, and that third
Be
floor
proud of that,
courtroom
taxpayers.
is
Be
a
proud of
jewel.
it.
Yeah, entirely so.
Yeah.
And our mission, along with, and I don't know, there isn't a day that goes by that Dave and I don't compliment the actual people in the courthouse, the judges, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely.
That contribute and share the philosophy about, I know we have to make changes. I know that we have to upgrade security, the whole electronic era and how that can be brought into the courthouse as a definite assist to the way the business is done. Is there a way to do that and maintain the character and the charm and the position in the society of the courtroom and the courthouse in general? So they subscribe to that. That makes our job so much easier when we're all pulling for the
We're
same.
all in the same boat.
Exactly. So they
Judith,
share in
we've sat
the
here,
desire.
the program is almost over, and we haven't announced 648-5510. We get very remiss about that. One of those 2 listeners out there might want to have something to say. So if you have any questions, and I'm serious about this, David Blankenship, Mr. Bill Walter, they can tell you what's going on in that courthouse. It just looks almost overpowering to look up there and see all that steel work up there. Judith, in the old days when they had steel workers building their skyscrapers, I think they called them steeplejacks. I don't know the derivation of that word, but we've all seen pictures on television of these guys throwing rivets and catching them in a bucket and all that. Well, it's not as quite as grandiose as that, but it's a big deal to have all this work going on in downtown Lincoln, and it's not just a busy work. We're preserving the future.
Exactly.
As well as
exactly.
the past.
Yes.
When this all started in the county board and you thought about the magnitude of this job, was there much disagreement about going forward?
Judy, I wouldn't call it disagreement. There's an awful lot of concern and a tremendous amount of speculation as to which direction to go. When this first started, there was discussion of doing the dome only. There was discussion of a new law and justice center, which was financially out of the county's reach. We looked at several different things, and each person made their own proposal of how best to continue. And it was quite a process. It really was.
Up on 3, how are you doing? That third floor courtroom had so much artwork in it. Is that going to be able to be preserved?
We are intending to keep that, yes.
Boy, that's got to be a job.
Yes. It is a job, number 1, to recognize it. Compliments for you to know that exists up there. A lot of people go in and they're distracted. They don't necessarily have artwork on their minds when they're in that courtroom. But they, as well as the judge, shares in the ability to know that they possess this artwork and they possess the character and the charm and the history that's behind that courthouse. So all of that is going to be maintained.
So I'm hearing
Wow.
you say, Mr. Walter, that our office holders are taking a proprietary interest, for want of a better word, in what you're doing up there.
Absolutely.
And that's
Judge,
very
the
news to the
sheriff,
benefit of everybody.
everybody is coming to the table with always constructive and always helpful personalities, and without that, you know as well as I do that things are not possible.
Right.
So it's
Totally.
done well, and we champion the fact that all of the surrounding businesses in the square, on the square, are bringing to the table that same optimism and that same willingness to cooperate in getting this done. They know it's going to be an inconvenience, but they're willing to understand, first and foremost, that it's going to happen and put up with it. They will do that.
Say
lot
a
of
side
foresight.
issue, if I may have a 30 seconds, or not less. Established with the flags on the 4 sides of that dome. I'm going to speak for every old geezer out there like myself. That was a great touch, putting that flag up there. And it kind of gives you a good feeling as you walk around that square. So, to whomever, the original idea, a snappy salute, and
Kind of gives you goosebumps, doesn't it?
yeah, no, it's seriously, Bill.
Yeah.
And you get older, you get more goosebumps.
That recommendation came from a tech committee member, and then fortunately,
A salute to them.
yeah, and then Bill and I discussed it, and through Bill, MRTS, he actually donated those flags, and his
Well,
company
Thank you for
took
that.
on all the
On
expense and
behalf
the
of them.
labor to get those up.
Yeah. Well, it's not a part of the discussion at all, but it's just a nice ancillary thing to have, to look
Absolutely.
up there as you
Absolutely.
walk about or drive about the courthouse and
Certainly
in
makes a
your mind
statement,
snap a
that's for
salute
sure.
in that direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, with the dome, will that be totally replaced or parts thereof?
Unfortunately, it all has to be redone.
It does.
Back in the 70s, an enterprising individual came through town and sold
A bill of goods.
system of fiberglass that was put over the top of the existing copper, and that is failing miserably. And as it should, after 50 years, irrespective of the fact that it was the bad thing
You
to do.
can only expect so much from anything after 50 years.
That's exactly right.
Including Bill and me.
Exactly.
Wish you hadn't said that.
So it all has to be redone. Number one, we want to make sure that when the project is complete, that the courthouse people inside have nothing to worry about from a leak standpoint. And that's the main reason why Dave contacted me. There's water inside our building, and there probably shouldn't be.
Oof, yeah.
So we want to make sure that that's going to be an absolute. There is no compromise in that regard. So by doing all of it, you can make those statements.
You know, David, we need to get a good PR person in to do a write-up on Mr. Walter's company and maybe give him a little nationwide expertise there, exposure. That's the big deal. It's a big deal for Lincoln. It's a big deal for Logan County.
I think they've done a good job already. The one particular reporter, Angela, we can say her name, has done a marvelous job being everywhere all the time. She shares in the interest of this courthouse being done, and we have had very representable articles in the paper
That's
that signify both the county's involvement and the people and the personalities, etc. This is a team. It just isn't me or Dave.
Not everybody, I'm sure, in your line of work is that lucky to get somebody like her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on
Absolutely.
behalf
Yes.
of the voters in the courthouse, we extend our thanks to David Blankenship and Bill Walter for giving of their time this morning. Once again, we've run out of the clock on Viewpoint. Thank you very much, Bill and David.
You're welcome.